Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those that are attending in person. Thank you for those that are with us virtually. I'm Troy Miller, the Director of U.S. Customs and Border Protection's New York Field Office. I would like to welcome you to the office here at John F. Kennedy International Airport. My area of responsibility is geographically the immediate New York area, encompassing JFK and the port of New York, Newark, which is comprised of the Newark Seaport and Newark Liberty International Airport. These locations represent 2 of the 5 busiest international airports in the country, as well as the 2nd largest seaport. We just finished a tour of John F. Kennedy International Mail Facility, the busiest such facility in the United States. The IMF continues to be at the forefront of international smuggling trends. Today, CBP makes literally hundreds of narcotic seizures each week at that facility, coming from countries across the globe. We are excited to welcome our Acting Commissioner, Mark Morgan, the Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Jim Carroll, and Chief Gary Barksdale, U.S. Postal Inspection Service, who will share their perspective on the abuse of the international mail system by transnational criminal organizations. And I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to all 3 of these gentlemen for the continued support of the men and women of CBP and here at John F. Kennedy International Airport. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Carroll.
Since we're looks like 20 feet apart, I'm going to take my mask off unless someone is uncomfortable. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to return to the International Mail Facility here at JFK. It's always great to be with the men and women of law enforcement and those on the front lines. Standing with me are those very men and women that I just described, the men and women that are operating the facility, that are protecting the front lines, which means protecting the American citizens. President Trump and I thank them for the work that they do every single day. They're identifying, they're seizing illegal drugs smuggled into the United States. And obviously the commissioner is going to talk about some of the other things that are going on here outside of that realm. As the principal drug advisor to the president, I visited the northern border, I visited the southern border, and a few weeks ago I visited the Caribbean border. And it may not seem like it right now, but this is the nation's border right here at JFK. This is the International Mail Facility. This is the main entry point into the United States for mail from all over the world. It has a major role in combating the flood of fentanyl sent from China to the United States. The work being done here by the combined whole of government approach by the men and women of CBP, HSI, DEA, USPIS, and more, of course the New York HIDTA, they're all combining forces here to be able to stop these drugs. A year ago, I led a White House delegation with the commissioner, with the chief inspector of USPIS, and we went there to demand action on President Trump's call for the Chinese government to stop sending fentanyl in the mail to the U.S. For the most part, the Chinese government responded. And we've had about a 90% reduction in drugs being trafficked in the mail from China to the U.S. But the drug trafficking organizations have not let up. We have squeezed the bubble, and now what we're seeing are drugs coming in from other places. The drug trafficking organizations are sending it to Mexico and then up. They're sending it to Europe and then over. And they're sending it through a variety of countries. We expected that. What we're doing is asking the men and women, the federal law enforcement, federal military, state and local, to rise to that challenge, and yet again they are. What they are doing now is seizing these drugs as they come in. What we're also doing is bringing the fight to the traffickers where they are. President Trump has commanded that all of us band forces come together and stop these terrorists that are terrorizing our communities with these drugs. We placed administration sanctions on China, and they rose to the occasion for the most part. Like I said, a 90% reduction. What we're doing is putting the traffickers in jail. Those people who have an addiction to drugs, we're treating them accordingly. We're getting them into treatment. They have an addiction and they need help, and we're making certain that they get it. But those people who have an addiction to greed, those people who have an addiction to money, who don't care, could care less about the people that have an addiction. They could care less that they're killing 70,000 Americans a year. Those are the people that we are using the full weight of the U.S. government to go after them. God bless the men, women of CBP, HSI, USPIS, FBI, DEA, as well as the Department of Defense, as well as our national intelligence agencies that have all listened to President Trump's call to make this a priority. And we are doing that. For the first time in 29 years, we had a reduction in the number of Americans dying of drug overdose. Sadly, the COVID pandemic, what we've seen is an increase, at least all the preliminary numbers show an increase in the number of overdoses. That's because people have lost their jobs. There's some hopelessness out there, especially the people that are newly into recovery. Those are the people that are most vulnerable to a relapse. And they work in the industries that really have been shuttered for the most part. Some of the retail environments, some of the restaurant environments, their doors are closed. And so the sense of satisfaction that they have from being in recovery is often lost. We need to get going again. The great American comeback will be just that. But it will also be that, and that's what we're doing, for the people who have an addiction. It's going to be a comeback for them. They're going to sustain their life. We're going to do it because we're stopping the drugs right here. At our country's border, right here at JFK, we're stopping the drugs from coming in and allowing those people to continue on their lives. Working together is critical. And with the leadership of Mark Morgan, with the leadership of Gary Barksdale, we are doing that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm definitely pleased to be here with Director Carroll and, of course, Chief Barksdale, Gary, to discuss our collective and unified efforts to intercept illicit opioids, including fentanyl, and to prevent these dangerous drugs from entering the United States from outside our borders every single day. And I'd like to emphasize something that Director Carroll stated, is that what's going on here at the International Mail Facility right here at JFK is the example of how effective that we, the United States government, can be when multiple agencies from across the spectrum join together to work together and collectively attack this threat that we face every single day. To the men and women of the Customs and Border Protection and our partners, Gary, all your folks, I couldn't be more proud of what they do, their efforts and their steadfast devotion to keeping America safe, especially with respect to this threat. And as we've learned, international mail and express consignment shipments are significant pathways for the smuggling of drugs into this country. The explosive growth of e-commerce alone, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, has increased international shipments to more than 450 million annually. Think about that. 450 million shipments annually. That's mind-boggling. And the harsh reality is, as Director Carroll stated, is trafficking organizations every single day are exploiting this conduit to send drugs and other contraband in the United States. And as was also stated, Director Carroll, I'm glad that you pointed out that standing here right now, we are at one of our borders. Again, a lot of people don't think about that. They don't put that together. I like to do it to kind of do an analogy is that right now in this environment, my analogy is that the international mail shipment environment, express consignment mail, is equivalent to tunnels, drug tunnels. The difference is the drug tunnels are coming from outside the border directly to your home, anywhere in the country. And that's why when we're discussing what we're discussing here today, every American citizen, it doesn't matter where you live, because we've been saying this for a long time. Every town, city, and state in this country is a border town, city, and state. What comes to our borders, it impacts you more than most people realize. I've been saying this for a long time. If you have a meth overdose, or if you have a fentanyl overdose, if you've known anyone who's had an overdose, if you've heard about it on local TV about a meth or fentanyl overdose specifically, I'm standing here guaranteeing you, more likely than not, that that meth or that fentanyl came from outside our borders. That's why we've been saying for a very long time as well, borders matter. It's why we know who and what is coming into our borders. And again, as Director Carroll stated, the President's support and this administration's recognition of just how critically important these threats are has been instrumental to our continued fight. And the stakes could not be higher. They're not getting less, particularly as they apply to fentanyl. Nationwide, in all environments, CBP has seized almost 4,000 pounds of fentanyl. And why does 4,000 pounds matter? Because why is this such an alarming amount? Because it only takes 2 milligrams of fentanyl to be lethal. 2 milligrams, and we've seized 4,000 last year. That should be a wake-up call to every American citizen in this country. And as was stated, look, this time last year, we did. We went to China. We talked to the Chinese government and industry leaders as well in Beijing. And we have seen significant progress, tremendous progress. As Director Carroll was stated, we've seen a significant drop, almost 90% in fentanyl in the international mail environment coming from China. So that's great progress, but we're not done. Mexico, unfortunately, as was mentioned, has now become the new preferred pathway for transnational criminal organizations in China. So we are not done. And as President Trump outlined last week, we're concerned that Mexico is becoming the predominant route and production hub for fentanyl and other synthetic opioids destined for the United States. In fact, Mexican authorities just recently published their seizures of fentanyl has increased by 465%. 465%. Seizures of fentanyl coming from Mexico are on pace for us, for CBP, to increase by 50%. These stats should be alarming no matter how you look at it, no matter how you cut this up. This is absolutely a significant problem. Just last month, as an example, CBP officers at our Louisville, Kentucky Express Consignment Hub found 700,000 doses, lethal doses of fentanyl concealed in packets of corsets from Mexico. And where they are headed? Right here in Brooklyn, New York. Again, the issue continues. Now, look, I'd like to also mention a special operation right now that CBP is a part of. It's called Operation Megaflex. It's an interagency, just like we're talking about right now in the drug environment. We can't do this without our partners side by side. This Operation Megaflex is the same thing. So it's an interagency monthly blitz operation that's done right here in JFK, and we've been doing it since almost a year, since 2019, where we surge resources to target networks in the international mail environment, entering mostly from China, to identify and prevent not only drugs, but other contraband and counterfeit products and goods from being introduced in the United States supply chains. These items, they pose a direct risk and jeopardize the health and safety of every American consumer. And here's another nuance a lot of people don't understand. When we're talking about intellectual property theft, counterfeit goods, that also dramatically impacts American businesses. It impacts innovation. It impacts our competitiveness. We lose countless billions of dollars every single year to our economy due to illicit and contraband goods coming into the U.S. economy. And these products, it covers the gamut from fake law enforcement badge to weapon accessories, silencers for weapons, and a whole host of other counterfeit goods, from watches to purses to shoes. And I'm telling you, it is absolutely detrimental to our economy. And again, Operation Megaflex has been an instrumental part of taking a bite out of that. As you can see, together, we are committed to working together across all agencies in the U.S. government, putting aside any differences we have, really joining together with our individual statutory authorities and responsibilities to work together. And when we do that, we're absolutely more effective. And that's exactly what's happening here at JFK. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chief Barksdale.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. You know, first right out of the gate, before I forget, in addition to thanking Mark and Jim for their leadership, I really want to thank the local leadership here at what we refer to as JFK International Service Center. They've done a tremendous job. I've visited here many, many times, and every time I come, I'm very impressed with the work that you guys do here. So not only for the work you do, but for the passion in which you do that work. You're truly doing work that saves American lives. And I also want to thank my team with the inspection service. The level of cooperation that I see here with my own eyes is certainly a model for the rest of the country to go by. Obviously, we're talking about illicit drugs and other items coming in through the mail system. These are remarkable times for law enforcement, and we have many challenges to deal with, not to mention the kind of creation of e-commerce and the boom in e-commerce. And primarily e-commerce rely on the Postal Service and other private carriers to get their illegal drugs and other dangerous substances here into the U.S. So the Postal Inspection Service, we're committed to finding and stopping these drug traffickers. The dark web has become an underground facilitator of illegal commerce, and it's critical, and I mean critical, now more than ever, to have tremendous partnerships like the one that's been displayed before me here today. Last week, I was proud to announce the result of Operation Disruptor, which was a worldwide roundup of drug traffickers that operate over the dark web. This operation is a prime example of how partnerships lead to success. Working with our federal agencies in close cooperation with international partners, we've seen a sizable increase in our arrests and our physical seizures. But again, this progress could not happen without our strong law enforcement partnerships within the United States and around the globe. That's why events such as Jim led the delegation to China last year was very important to engage our international community. Obviously, China plays a critical role in our battle with illicit opioids. And last year, at those meetings in China with Director Morgan and Jim, we had really good conversation, very honest conversation about how we were to disrupt the flow of fentanyl. And I believe we secured some good commitments from China to increase cooperation to stop the illegal production of fentanyl and trafficking to the U.S., although there's much, much more to go, as Mark indicated. This is kind of just the beginning. In addition, the scheduling of fentanyl by China has helped, I think. That, based on the action of the men and women that you see here on the ground, has led to a dramatic decrease in the number of synthetic opioid seizures here at the International Service Center. The trend has continued through the year, and actually from the inspection service perspective, we actually have 0 seizures from China fiscal year to date. However, we have seen a shift in drugs activity on the southwest border. It's something we're moving to work very hard to address as well. On another note, before I do want to give a shout out to the men and women of the Postal Service who was operating through this pandemic. The more than 600,000 employees that make up the United States Postal Service, I feel, have stood very tall. They have not wavered in their mission to deliver the nation's mail. Postal employees are not in a position to work from home. Mark and I was having that conversation. So are many of the men and women here. You don't have an option to telework or work from home, and you do your job every single day. They show up every day to process and deliver the mail, more than 150 million delivery points every single day to every neighborhood across the country. Postal employees remain a critical lifeline to those who depend on the mail for prescription drugs and other essentials. So I salute the men and women in this room and the 600 men and women of the Postal Service. And that's one of the reasons why the Postal Service, Postal Inspection Service, feel so strongly about the work we do. Not only are we saving the lives of our own employees, but we're saving lives in the American public. A couple of years ago, when we started to address this initiative, we created a team that we call CI2, Contraband Interdiction and Investigation, which is led by Dan and Dami there. We continue to support that team with enhanced investigative methods. We're continuing to strengthen our partnerships. Again, the model of partnership is done right here in New York. And I'm pleased to say as we move forward, we're going to strengthen that relationship with our state and local partners. We're also working on our international partnerships. Last year, we decided to dedicate a full-time postal inspector to be permanently detailed to Europol to work on those relations as well. Data analytics play a key part in what we do. Obviously, the mail volume that Mark spoke about, we have to have sophisticated means of going through all the packages. So data analytics is a big part of what we do. So we want to use what we call advanced electronic data, combine that with our historical seizure data, and then obviously criminal intelligence to be better focused and to better target illicit drug parcels. I'd like to give you, the last thing I'd like to do is give you just an idea of how massive our operations are here at the JFK Airport at our International Service Center. So the Service Center processes more than 200 million parcels in a year, which breaks down to 600,000 parcels every single day. That's a lot of mail for Customs and Border Protection to examine. So to enhance our targeting efforts, we're linked to our local, national, and international partners and a standardized format to track parcels and their technologies. For example, at CBP's National Targeting Center, we work directly with them to target incoming parcels containing illicit drugs based on intelligence and analytics. And then we just mentioned the other tool that we're really working on is develop new detection tools. And hopefully later in the year, we'll have a lot more to come on the opioid detection challenge, which was a partnership between DHS, ONDCP, and Customs and Border Patrol. So we've expanded our efforts to stem the flow of illicit drugs in the mail. The scale and complexity of drug trafficking continues to evolve. Traffickers quickly adapt to law enforcement strategies and tactics, increasing the challenge of disrupting their networks and infrastructure. So here's what we're seeing. From fiscal year 2018 to date, the inspection service has over a 90% decrease in fentanyl seizures from our international service centers. We're seeing a corresponding 172% increase in domestic mail seizures. As I said before, we're seeing a decrease in international mail seizures, but an increase particularly around our border state. COVID-19 is also influencing criminal behavior in significant ways as it is rapidly changing with emerging technologies. Inbound mail volume is significantly down due to shipping constraints and limited personnel and transportation related to COVID. Although international mail processing is regaining capacity, the use of maritime cargo due to the limitation of air flights continues to trend upward. And then COVID-19 also has experienced tremendous challenges for law enforcement. A simple example, everybody in this room is wearing a mask. It's pretty hard for us to identify drug dealers sometimes when they're wearing masks. It's also presenting challenges on the enforcement issue. The bottom line is this. There's much work that remains. But I feel that along with my agency, all the men and women in this room are up for that challenge. We take our mission very seriously to protect the security and safety of the mail. And we're committed to taking all the necessary actions to combat illicit drugs in the mail. These efforts help us to achieve the even more important goal, and that is to save lives. Thank you.
At this time, if any media in attendance wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. I'll come to you with a microphone. I only ask you that you identify yourself, the outlet that you represent, and who your question is directed for, which three of the principals.
I'll open it to whoever wants to answer it. But can you tell us a little bit how your operations have been impacted specifically by COVID as far as what you've been finding? Has it changed what people have been trying to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Have your operations discovered any changes in what people have found as a result of COVID? Thank you.
Yeah, and Director Miller, are you here? You can join me too. So, yeah, overall, this is what I would say. Unfortunately, whenever there's a crisis, unfortunately, there's going to be criminals that are going to step up and take advantage of it to line their bank account. And COVID-19, the global pandemic that's killed and taken a lot of lives, is no different. Really, from the get-go, criminals organizations start taking advantage of it. And so what we've done, we started immediately, again, I know we keep saying this, but it's true, an interagency task force that we put together to really make sure that we're preventing counterfeit COVID-19 related PPE, gloves, hand sanitizer, face masks from being entered in the U.S. supply chain. To get to the very people that need it, we want to make sure we were doing that expeditiously, but we wanted to make sure that those goods were actually legitimate. And what we found is a lot of them are not. We found countless fake test kits, bad hand sanitizer, bad gloves, you name it, across the board. We've found it. I mean, in the tens of thousands of products. It's really, really disgusting from my perspective. But you want to talk about maybe specifically what you found here?
No, very much as Commissioner Morgan pointed out, we've seen a lot of that stuff related to COVID, specifically at the beginning of the crisis, whether it's medication claiming that it's enabled to combat the virus, the COVID, or antivirus medication that doesn't really work. Lanyards, they had lanyards that specifically indicated that would keep the virus away. A lot of test kits, a lot of fraudulent test kits, masks, N95 masks that are supposed to keep the particles out, that are supposed to be certified to keep the certain particles out, that didn't meet those standards. And as the commissioner stated, we worked very closely with not only the partners in this room, but FDA and a number of other folks, FEMA, to look at those shipments and determine what was fraudulent. And we did see a lot of that at the IMF at the beginning of the crisis, not as much now.
Yeah, if I could real quick, so men and women of OFO that are here, can you guys step up? I'd like you to come forward, please. Yep, I know you don't want to, but come forward.
Yeah, get
Right.
up on stage.
Yeah.
Get up.
So,
Take my place.
yeah, come on. So I just want you to see the faces of the incredible men and women, as Gary stated, as we have talked about, the folks behind me every single day from the very beginning of COVID, they were not able to telework it in. The overwhelming majority of CBP are actually badge-wearing, gun-toter law enforcement officers. They don't have the luxury to, as I said, telework. They're worried about their own health, and more importantly, they're worried about their family's health. But every single day they come and they get the job done to protect the American people. And I want to drive another point home to really to your question. We have been devastated, CBP, by this horrible disease. We've had over 2,000 employees that have contracted COVID. We've had 13 employees, 13 die directly related to COVID. 11 of them right now have been in the line of duty. So again, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you and the rest of the men and women of CBP who every single day, your job is tough and risky enough, but in the middle of a global pandemic, you're still getting up every day, going on the front lines, on the border, where we stand right now, protect the American people. So I thank you.
May I join you?
Of course. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. It's hard not to look at these heroes behind me and think about one thing. When I was standing there, I was looking at the side of the uniform, and your patch, all their patches say, at the end of it, it says protection. That's exactly what they're doing. They're protecting the American citizens. That's what we ask law enforcement to do every day. Federal, state, local, tribal. We're asking them to protect Americans. It says it on their patch every morning when they get up and go to work, every night when they get up and work an overnight and leave their family. Let me be very clear. This administration, this president, we defend the police. We defend law enforcement. Any calls to take any power and ability, any resources away from them means an increase in the number of Americans that are dying of a drug overdose. And sadly, what we've also seen is an increase in crime. The men and women of CBP are asked to do lots of things these days. God bless them all for what they're doing, because as the patch says, they're protecting us. So thank you.
Any other questions? If there's no other questions, this concludes the press conference for today. I appreciate everybody coming out here, and have a great day. Enjoy your weekend.